A Visit to Gloucester and Berkeley. Sketches on the mood singular introduction to An Old Friend a Tithe cause trita strange assemblage of witnesses traits of character effects of the farmers' success and odd cavalcade rejoicings at Berkeley. The road from Cheltenham to Gloucester affords a good view of the Cotswold and Stroudwater hills, diversified by the vales of Evesham, Gloucester, and Berkeley, bounded on the east by the Severn, and presenting in many situations a very rich picturesque appearance. We are not of the dull race who dwell on musty records and ancient inscriptions, or travel through a county to collect the precise date when the first stone of some now moss-ground ruin was embedded in the antique clay beneath. Let the dead sleep in peace. We are not antiquae ones enough to wish the moldering relics of our ancestors arrayed in chronological order before our eyes, nor do we mean to risk our merry lives in exploring the monastic piles and subterranean vaults and passages of other times. No, our office is with the living, with the enriched Gothic of modern courts, and the finished Corinthian capitals of society, illustrating, as we proceed, with choice specimens of the rustic and the grotesque. Now laughing over our wine with the Tuscan bacchanal, or singing a soft tale of love in the ear of some chaste daughter of the composite order. Trifling perhaps a little harmless badinage with a simple Ionic, or cracking a college joke with a learned Doric. Never troubling our heads, or those of our readers, about the origin or derivation of these orders, whether they came from early Greece or more accomplished home, or be their progenitors of Saxon, Norman, Danish, or of Anglo-Saxon character, we care not. 'Tis ours to depict them as they at present appear, leaving to the profound topographers and compilers of county histories all that relates to the black-letter lore of long-forgotten days. Gloucester is proverbial for its dullness, and from the dirty appearance of the streets and houses, was, by my friend Transit, denominated the Black City, a designation he maintained to be strictly correct, since it has a cathedral, a bishop, and a black choir of canonicals, and was from earliest times the residence of a black brotherhood of monks, whose black deeds are recorded in the black-letter pages of English history. To which was added another confirmatory circumstance, that upon our entrance it happened the assizes for the county had just commenced, and the black gowns of Banco Regis and of the law were preparing to try the blacks of Gloucestershire, out of which arose a black joke that will long be remembered by the inhabitants of Berkeley and the tenantry of the sable colonel. We had made our domicile at the Ham Inn by the recommendation of our Cheltenham host, where we met with excellent accommodations, and what, beside, we could never have anticipated to have met with in such a place, one of the richest scenes that had yet presented itself in the course of our eccentric tour. The unusual bustle that prevailed in every department of the inn together, with a concatenation of sounds, now resembling singing and speaking, and the occasional scraping of some ill-toned violins above our heads, induced us to make a few inquisitive 286 remarks to mine host of the Ham, that quickly put us in possession of the following facts. It appeared that a suit respecting the right of the vicar of Berkeley to the great tithes of that town had been long pending in the Court of Chancery, in which the Reverend was opposed to his former friend, the Colonel, the churchwardens of Berkeley, and the whole of the surrounding tenantry. Now this cause was, by direction of the Lord Chancellor, to be tried at these assizes, and, in consequence, the law agents had been most industrious in bringing together, by subpoena, all the ancient authorities of the county, the aged, the blind, and the halt, to give evidence against their worthy pastor. And as it is most conducive to success in law, the keeping witnesses secure from tampering, and in good humor with the cause, the legal advisers had prepared such festive cheer at the BAM, for those of the popular interest, as would have done honor to the colonel's banquet at the castle. Such was the information we obtained from our host, to whose kind introduction of us to the lawyers we were afterwards indebted for a very pleasant evening's amusement. We were ushered into the room by one of the legal agents as two gentlemen from London, who, being strangers in the place, were desirous of being permitted to spend their evening among such a jovial society. The uproarious mirth and rude welcome with which this communication was received by the company, added to the clouds of smoke which enveloped their chairman, prevented our immediate recognition of him. But great and pleasant indeed was our surprise to find the most noble, the very learned head of the table, to be no other than our old Eton con. Little Dick Gratis, to whose lot it had fallen to conduct this action and defend the interests of the agriculturalists against the mercenary encroachments of the church militant. This was indeed no common cause, and the greatest difficulty our friend Gratis had to encounter was the restricting within due bounds of moderation the overzealous feelings of his witnesses. It was quite clear a parson's tithes, if left to the generosity of his parishioners, would produce but a small modicum of his reverence's income. The jovial farmer chuckled with delight at the prospect of being able to curtail the demands of his canonical adversary. "Meester Carrington," said he, "may be a very good sort of a preacher, but I knows he has no sort of business with tithing my property, and if zo be as the gentleman judge will let me, gad zooks. But I will prove my words, better than he did the old Earl's marriage when he made such a fool of himsel before the peers in Parliament." "That's your zort, Meester Tiller," resounded from all the voices round the table. "Let the clergy zo for themselves, and grow for themselves, as the varmers do. What a dickens should we work all the week for the good of their bodies, when they only devote 1 hour in the whole 7 days for the benefit of our zowls?" "That's right, Meester Coppinger," said someone next to the speaker. "You are 100 years of age, and pray how many times have you heard the parson preach?" "I never zeed him in his pulpit in the whole curs of my life. But then you know that were my fault, I might if I would. But I zeb been a main close attendant upon the church for all that. During the old Earl's lifetime, I was a sort of deputy huntsman, and then the parson often followed me. And when I got too old to ride, I was made assistant gamekeeper, and then I very often followed the parson. So you see I ze a true churchman, every inch of me. Only I don't like poaching, and when his reverence wants me to help him sack his tithes, old Jack Coppinger will tell him to his head he may e'en carry the bag himself." A toast from the chair. "Let's hear the lawyer's sentiments on this subject," said another, with which request Gratis complied by giving, "May he who plows and plants the soil reap all its fruits." "Aye, Meester Gratis, that is as it should be," reiterated a farmer on his right. "Zo I'll give you, the varmers against the parsons. And there's old Tom Sykes yonder, the thatcher, he will give you a zong about the tithe pig and the 10th child. A main good stave, I do assure you." A request which the old thatcher most readily complied with, to the great delight of all present. For independent of his dialect, which was of the true rich West Country character, there was considerable wit and humor in the song, and an archness of manner in the performer that greatly increased the good humor of the society. In this way the evening was spent very pleasantly. And as the cause was to come on the first thing on the ensuing morning, Transit and myself determined to await the issue, anticipating that, if our merry-hearted companions, the rustics, should be successful, there would be no lack of merriment, and some exhibition of good sport both for the pen and pencil. We had strayed after breakfast to view the cathedral, which is very well worthy the attention of the curious, and certainly contains some very ancient relics of the great and the good of earliest times. On our return, the deafening shouts of the multitude, who were congregated outside the sessions house, proclaimed a favorable verdict for the farmers, who, in the excess of their joy at having beaten their reverend adversary, gave loose to the most unrestrained expressions of exultation. A messenger was immediately dispatched to Berkeley to convey, express, the glad tidings. And the head farmers of the parish, with whom were the churchwardens, determined to commemorate their victory by roasting a bullock whole on the brow of the hill which overlooked their vicar's residence, and for the preparation of which festivity they also sent their instructions. The next grand point was, how to 289 convey the witnesses, who were very numerous, to the scene of action, a distance of 18 miles. To have dispatched them in postchaises, could they have found a sufficient number in Gloucester, was neither in accordance with economy, nor with the wishes of the parties themselves, who were very anxious to have a grand procession, and enjoy themselves as they went along in smoking, singing, drinking, and proclaiming their triumph to their neighbors and friends. Mine hostess of the Ram, with every female in her establishment, had been, from the moment the verdict was given to the departure of the group, busily engaged in making large blue favors, of the colonel's color, to decorate the hats of the visitors, until Mr. Boots arrived with the dismaying intelligence that not another yard of riband, of the color required, could be obtained in all the city of Gloucester. With equal industry and perseverance, the host himself had put in requisition every species of conveyance that he could muster, which was calculated to suit the views of the parties and form a grand cavalcade, without much attention to the peculiar elegance of the vehicles, to be sure, but with every arrangement for social comfort. It had been decided that my friend Transit and myself should accompany Richard Gradus, Esq., the solicitor to the fortunate defendants, in a post-coach in front, preceded by 4 of mine host's best horses, with postilions decorated with blue favors and streamers flying from the 4 corners of the carriage. And now came the marshalling of the procession to follow. One of the colonel's hay vans had been supplied with seats, lengthwise, in which the first division of farmers placed themselves, not, however, forgetting to take in a good supply of ale and pipes with them. Next in order was one of the old-fashioned double-bodied stages, which had not been cleaned or out of the coachyard for 20 years before, and both in the ~290 inside, and on the roof of which the more humble rustics and farmers' laborers were accommodated. This vehicle was drawn by 4 cart horses of the roughest description, the rear of the whole being brought up by a long black funeral hearse, with 3 horses, unicorn fashion, on the roof of which the men sate sidewise, while the interior was, by Gradus's orders, well filled with casks of the best Gloucester ale. About a dozen of the farmers, on horseback, rode by the side of the vehicles, and in this order, with the accompaniment of a bugle in the hay van and a couple of blind fiddlers scraping on the center of the roof of the hearse, did we sally forth in most grotesque order, amid the joyous acclamations of the multitude, on our way to Berkeley, every countenance portraying exultation and good humor, and everywhere upon the road meeting with a corresponding welcome. A more humorous or whimsical procession cannot well be imagined, men, animals, and vehicles being perfectly unique. By the time we had reached our destination, the potent effects of the Gloucester ale, added to the smoking and vociferous expressions of joy that attended us throughout, had left very few of our rustic friends without the visible and outward signs of their inward devotions to the jolly god. On our arrival near to Berkeley, we were met by crowds of the joyous inhabitants, and proceeded onward to the spot selected for the festive scene, where we found the bullock already roasting on the top of the hill, and where also they had pitched a tent and brought some small cannon, with which they fired a feu de joie on our arrival, taking special care to point their artillery in the direction of the vicar's residence. On the opposite side of the road was the church, and it is not a little singular that the steeple, belfry, and tower are completely detached from the body of the building. The vicar, dreading the riotous joy of his parishioners upon ~291 this occasion, had locked up the church, and issued his mandate to the wardens to prevent a merry peal. But these persons insisting that as the church was detached from the belfry, the vicar had no authority over it, they directed the ringers to give them a triple bob major, which canonical music was merrily repeated at intervals, to the great dismay of the parson, who, over and above the loss he was likely to sustain in his future interests, had by this defect suffered under a legal expenditure of some thousands of pounds. The colonel did not show, perhaps from prudential motives of respect to his old friend, but his agents were well instructed in their duty, and there was no lack of a plentiful supply of provision and ale for his tenantry to make right merry with. Thus ended our trip to Berkeley, where, after taking a view of the castle on the following morning, and surveying the delightful scenery with which that most ancient building is surrounded, we bade adieu to our friend Gradus, and mounted the Cheltenham coach as it passed through on our way to Bristol.